Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Well, this is the GSMC Baseball Podcast here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Collin Manley, tuning in with you again on another great episode that we are looking forward to talking about. We have so much that we need to cover. We need to get going on some news and noise around the league, some updates and some things that we've been talking about before, but still want to get us updated. I want to take a little bit of time to talk about Manager of the Year talk. We have the announcement coming shortly. I'm recording this on November 10th, but an announcement for our Manager of the Years is going to be coming soon. So I wanted to take a little bit of a dive into those. I got a little bit of flack because I talked about all the major awards that I covered Rookie of the Year, I covered the Cy Young, I covered MVP, and people thought I kind of really brushed over Manager of the Year. So I got to make sure that I give that one its full due. I want to talk about some teams outside of our normal spenders. I want to look at some other teams that I think could potentially be aggressive in this offseason. And I also want to take some time to talk about some names that could end up being very important in this offseason. We haven't been focusing on these guys enough. And they're going to be in discussions, but I think as the offseason goes on, we could be talking about them a lot more and more. But I want to be starting things off with that news and noise, get you caught up with news around the league based on all of our MLB teams. And the first one, well, Alex Cora has returned. He had his opening presser, the chance where he got to talk to the media fully about everything that was going on. And if there is one big thing we can talk about Cora, is he was honest that I got my penalty and I went and served it. So he was quoted saying at the Tuesday's press conference when the suspension had happened, this is the last thing that I was thinking of potentially being reintroduced as the Red Sox manager. I had to take care of a lot of things at a personal level, take care of my family, and baseball was far away from my thoughts. Kind of the end quote. And Cora had been one that really apologized for his role in the sign stealing scandal, saying it was a tough year for him. He said that he was spending a lot of time at home for reasons that he knew were wrong. He thought he was deserving of what had happened to him, and it's something he openly admitted he's not proud of. So ultimately, in this press conference, it was a lot of him saying the right things that needed to be said. Now, is it all fair and honest from what was coming from him? There's only Cora and, the good Lord above, who's the only people that probably really know or have any idea if he has any honesty to it. But he said what he had to say. So that's about all we have to go off of. And when it comes down to it, he had a successful year. First year in 2018 with the Red Sox, he won 108 games. You can't bash his success. And, it's going to be the same thing as we see for players all the time. If players have talent, they're going to get continuous opportunities. Whether you believe what happened to them off the field was enough to push them away, these guys are going to get second chances. And he showed that he has the ability to manage, and so he's going to get that second chance. He's not going to stay out of the game, whether you think he should or not. It's just not going to happen. And it's the same thing for A.J. Hinch. Okay? We know that he was going to get that other opportunity once the suspension was up. So that's what we have to move on to. Staying with the Astros sign-stealing scandal, their former general manager, Jeff Luhnow, has filed a lawsuit against the Houston Astros after the sign-stealing scandal. And he's seeking more than $22 million after alleging his firing was through a negotiated resolution between owner Jim Crane and MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred, and that it allowed the Astros to keep their World Series championship if he was part of the firing. His attorneys were saying that they had filed agreement between Kane and Manfred, saying that Loonhow became a scapegoat for the sign stealing scandal, and he had no knowledge and played no part in it. This was filed in Texas, so it's going to go through the Texas District Courts. It's Harris County. There definitely will be a lot more information that comes with this as time goes on. But I sit here and I go, $22 million is a steep ask. And I think right away, he has to have some sort of evidence or backing to go in with that much of a, that much money that he's looking to go after. Now, I'm not a perfect law person to know everything, the ins and outs. Maybe this is just what you do right away and ask for a lot of money. But I just found that very interesting if that's being the number, because that's just a massive amount of money to be going after. And we've heard from Manfred in the past who's saying there was significant evidence that he was in the wrong and he knew what was happening. So I really do believe that if the MLB has that type of evidence to really blow this out, it'll be done quick. But with court system stuff, that it can drag out. So something we'll definitely be keeping our eye on moving forward. This scandal just doesn't seem to die. And I have to honestly say a little bit that I'm okay with it sticking around, because I truly felt like these players in the Houston organization didn't really get as much criticism as they possibly could have this season. The no fans thing made it a little bit easier on them. And if this headline sticks around, this story sticks around, when fans start being able to trickle back into the stadiums, it's not going to be so easy for those players. And like I said, they really kind of dodged a big time amount of punishment just coming from the fans. So it's something to point out, that's for sure. Moving things along, Mr. Steve Cohen had his introduction with the Mets, and talking about saying all the right things, and we're getting the same stuff from Mr. Cohen. And he had a great opening remark about asking what kind of owner he's going to be. And he flat out came out and said, I'm going to be an owner who builds a team that has continued success. We want to create a blueprint for winning. Again, saying all the right stuff. He wants to build. He wants something great. And he was very clear about that. And that just screams, like we've talked about before, a guy worth, I believe, north of $14 billion, using $2.4 billion to buy the Mets. Man, do I got the feel that he's going to have a pretty aggressive offseason. A guy getting in, jumping in, saying all this stuff, I think he wants in. Also kind of talked about something that was interesting to hear from a new owner right away, starting with homegrown talent, building from there. When we need to fill a gap, we're going to fill it. There might be through free agent or doing it through trade. We're going to strengthen our farm system. So he's made it clear. He wants to build this championship. And it sounds like, as he's saying right now, all alternatives are on the table. So that's exciting. That's interesting to hear about. We'll see where it goes from there. Some other news to stay with the Mets. Well, Luis Rojas is likely to return for his second season as the New York Mets manager. Sandy Alderson, who was returning as team president Friday, that was announced with Steve Cohen after he bought the Mets, said he had spoken with Rojas several times in the recent days, and it's seeming very likely that he is going to remain, but the door was left, quote, slightly ajar, end quote. So we don't know 100%, but it looks like it's leaning towards Rojas returning to be the manager. And this is also coming after general manager Brody Van Wagenen and his top aides were fired on Friday. So it's an interesting situation, but as of right now, it's coming out of the Associated Press that they believe Rojas will be returning. Still a to be determined for sure, but that's the way it's looking right now. Staying with some managerial news, Tony La Russa had some very, very upsetting news released about him. Our newest Chicago White Sox manager was having a little bit of an issue in late October when he had a DUI given to him in Arizona after blood and breath tests taken the night of his February arrest showed his blood alcohol concentration was over the legal limit of 0.08. The White Sox have said that they were aware of these pending charges, and there's not a great deal of information here, but it appears that from some footage and some reports that during this arrest, Tony La Russa was telling the officer, "I'm a Hall of Famer," in the whole situation to try to maybe coax his way out of it. It's people, when it comes to just working with the police, man, just we don't need to make this too complicated sometimes. And there's definitely some issues going on all around, and that's not a topic for me to discuss. But some of these are just interesting. Just keep your mouth shut and just do what you need to do sometimes. That's it's simple as that. You'll get out of these situations a lot better, but man, not off to a great start for La Russa and the White Sox. But again, the White Sox have claimed, hey, we knew this was already happening. It's just interesting to see. We'll have to pay attention to see if any more news comes out of this. And lastly, we had some news on the Rookie of the Year fronts. Mariner center fielder Kyle Lewis was a unanimous American League winner. He suffered a devastating right knee injury just 30 games into his professional career, came back strong, looked really great in the 2020 season. And then on the National League side, Devin Williams, one of the best relievers, not just as a rookie, but in baseball, period, last season. I mean, he was phenomenal. And this is two big wins. This is guys that we thought were going to have it. There were a lot of great rookies, but these were two that kind of had the best stats far and away. Kyle Lewis was really holding on to this thing from the start of the season to the end. Really didn't have a lot of doubt about that one. The National League one is just interesting because a pitcher doesn't always get it. This is the first time a pitcher has won the Rookie of the Year since, I believe, 2011, when it was Craig Kimbrell who had taken it with the Atlanta Braves. So it's definitely a very unique winning situation that we aren't familiar with to see. But when it comes to the numbers for Devin Williams, more than deserving. The guy was unhittable this year. His numbers against his strikeout was the lowest batting average against one single pitch in the majors. 0.33 ERA, .090 opponent average in 27 innings across 22 appearances. That only earned run came on July 27th in his second appearance, so he went that strong afterwards. Just a phenomenal season for Devin Williams, and also for Kyle Lewis. Want to give credit to both of these guys for sure. So that's what we have for news and noise, getting you caught up on all Major League Baseball teams. Coming up next, we have to take the time and talk about another major award. I snuffed this one last time. Like I said before, I took some flack for it. I need to repay my dues on this. And we're going to talk about Manager of the Year coming up here in the next segment on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Collin Manley, and we need to talk about some awards. And yes, I know we've discussed awards already on an episode previous, but I didn't do a good enough job. I didn't cover it all well enough. So I have to make sure that I break down all of this. Now, we have the announcement for Managers of the Year coming. That is coming shortly. And so we have to make sure that we don't play any spoilers for you. By the time you hear this, you are going to know who our winners are. But for right now, we're going to talk about just our finalists for sure going forward. In the American League, we have Kevin Cash for the Rays, Charlie Montoyo for the Blue Jays, and Rick Renteria for the White Sox. For the National League, Don Mattingly for the Marlins, David Ross for the Cubs, and Jace Tingler for the Padres. Now, I want to just say this out on the front end. Every single one of these guys would be a very deserving winner. This is an award that every single year I really struggle with because it can go really any way whatsoever. And it's really what you want in a manager. Do you want it to be the guy that has the best record in baseball? Maybe that's what you're going for. Do you want it to be the guy that took his team from most improvement from one year to the next? This really goes a lot of different directions, and I can't say that one way is the ultimate end all. Okay, so it's something we have to talk about and be very careful with. So we're going to look at each division. We're going to break it down, see what we have for sure. And I want to start things off with the American League because I really, again, I find this to be intriguing. It could go a lot of different ways. Now, Kevin Cash is very deserving. Over the past 3 seasons, Cash has been great and considered one of the best managers in the majors. 2020 was really one of his best seasons, okay? And there's really no great way to talk about how you were going to handle this season, and that really goes for each of these guys. And the Rays got off to a rocky start. They were 5-7 to start the season. They kept their cool, and at the end of the day, they were the team with the top record. They were 40-20 on the season. Their first AL East title since 2010. And after getting a couple third-place finishes in this, we could potentially be seeing Kevin Cash finally getting the award. Now, I think a lot of voters are going to lean Cash just because the Yankees were the favorited team in the American League East, and the Rays were just the surprise winner, not only in the division, but as the top team in the American League. But he was also able to ride this all the way to the World Series. And while this team in Tampa is very good, don't get me wrong, they aren't full of superstars and top-tier talent like some other teams are and some of the other teams we're going to talk about. So I think that has an impressive touch to it. And the way he managed this team and their strengths were defense, and he handled the bullpen so well, it just has his fingerprints all over this team, and I think he's going to get a lot of love and a lot of respect from voters just because of that. So if I had to say I had a favorite that I would be thinking he's going to get it, I would think Kevin Cash, even though these other two guys are very, very, very impressive. So, like I said, Charlie Montoyo for the Blue Jays. I don't think many people expected them to sneak into the postseason. And yeah, I know. We had an expanded playoff format where 16 teams make it. In a normal season, we do not see the Blue Jays make the postseason. And ultimately, they got swept by that Rays team in the postseason. So it wasn't much there. But when we knew the Yankees were going to be better, we knew the Rays were going to be better, we didn't probably expect such a awful season from the Red Sox, but things were not great. And Baltimore also had its moments in the season. The Blue Jays coming out hot to end the year and ending at 32-28 was impressive. And it's also impressive considering the fact that this was built around a very young core of promising players. And we're not going to knock any of the talent. The talent is all there in Toronto. We know it. We've been excited about all of these guys for quite some time, these second generation youngsters. But they're still incredibly young. And it's not easy to just take a bunch of young players and turn it into a winning season and a positive year. And who knows what would have happened if this 60-game season goes out to 162. So you have to give him some credit. I think it's great that he's going to be a top 3 finisher, but ultimately the accolades for the Blue Jays just aren't as high as the Rays and also our other team here in the Chicago White Sox. So I think congrats, hats off to Charlie Montoyo for having a great season, but I don't see you getting potentially the votes to win this. And our last guy, Rick Renteria, man, this is interesting. It's similar to the story this happened in the NBA not too long ago when Dwayne Casey was NBA Coach of the Year, and then the Raptors let him go. As I would just love the idea of the story of Rick Renteria winning this award, and at the same time, him and the team have decided to mutually part ways. And this coming on the eve of Tony La Russa's, the story being announced of the DUI, it's it would be a perfect storm, really, I would say. And the White Sox are similar to the Blue Jays in the sense of we may not have expected them to be this good this year. We believed in their talent. We believed in their potential. But they stepped up and they were one of the most competitive teams in the majors this year. Something that would have helped is if they held on to win the American League Central. That's going to be the one knock I think Renteria is going to get. But he's been there over a rebuild for the last few seasons, losing 284 games in total in the last 3 years to develop some top talent. And he was a big part of that transition to being a team with a winning record. And it's their first season above 500 since 2012. So the history of the franchise and what happened here is impressive. And that's a fun storyline if voters want to look at that. But ultimately, I think this is going to go to Kevin Cash. Renteria second, Montoya third would be my guess right now. But all very deserving candidates. And that's the way this usually breaks every single year when it comes to the manager of the year. So congratulations to those 3 for even being in the consideration. They all did great things. They're all very deserving. Nothing but great stuff to say. Moving on to the National League. This one's fun in the sense of none of these options were our best record in the National League. None of these options were the team that won the National League pennant. Or is it our World Series champion? We get to pick off of just what we thought was the most impressive. And, oh, man, I struggle to pick one off this, but I think I have a way where I'd vote. We're going to talk about Don Mattingly first. Nobody was going to be picking the Marlins to make the postseason in 2020 at the beginning of the year. Nobody was going to be picking them. And then let's take into effect all of the positive COVID tests that they had. 18 Marlins players tested positive for COVID. And so then they missed a bunch of games. They had to go into a bunch of doubleheaders. They had to build and put together a roster to just try and get everything together. And it was unbelievable when they came out of it. The Marlins came out and won 5 straight coming out of their COVID hiatus. The Marlins used 61 different players. 18 of their players made their MLB debuts. Even Don Mattingly said that he didn't recognize names or faces of some players that were added to the roster. But he was able to take this team. They were able to go out, win, do just enough to make the postseason, be competitive. And here's the thing. I know this vote is not meant to be a postseason award. But I can't get over the fact that then they went and beat the Cubs in the first round of the playoffs. Like, it was just overall very impressive with what Mattingly did. And he also deserves a tip of the cap because it was just a phenomenal season for Miami when nobody really expected this coming. And it makes it interesting what the expectations will be for next year, because in all reality, on the top of my head, I look at the National League East and I'm still thinking, okay, Braves should be the favorite. Nationals are going to be healthy. The Phillies still have all this talent. We'll see what they do this offseason. And the Mets are going to come out and spend. The Marlins are almost an afterthought for me. And they shouldn't be. I mean, they should finish second. I should be giving them more credit, but they're almost still an afterthought for me. And so it's something to keep an eye on. Congratulations to Mattingly on having such a great season. Then we have David Ross and the Cubs. Now, the Cubs are a team that had a ton of talent. And Ross is stepping in, taking over a team that has a lot of talent. But the thing that I find impressive here is it's hard to cross a line. Do you think about those people that you work with, and then all of a sudden they get a promotion, and then now they're working above you? They're technically like a boss. Well, that's the situation that just happened here in Chicago. David Ross was a teammate to a lot of these guys not too long ago. Now, all of a sudden, he is your manager. He is your coach. So we going to be your friend, your teammate, to all of a sudden, hey, I'm your boss. I'm your manager. I make the decisions here. And he stepped in, and it seemed like a very seamless transition. They took control of the NL Central early, and they held it throughout the year. Now, does that change if the Cardinals don't have their little issue? I don't know. Don't know. But all we have is the information we have right now. And there were injury issues to go through. There was some guys that were very much underperforming. Javier Baez, Chris Bryant, Rizzo, Schwarber, they weren't their best. Now, he got some great performances from like Ian Happ. Jason Hayward wasn't bad for him. But your guys that were supposed to be your studs, they weren't the best. Their bullpen was still a mess. And yet they were able to win enough games to get to the postseason. So it's impressive in the sense of what he did there. And I think that Chicago should be optimistic looking forward, especially considering they had Joe Madden. Joe Madden was there for so long, did some great things, but it was time to move on. And David Ross looks like he's moving things in the right direction. Now the Cubs' biggest thing is going to be what they're going to do with their roster. Our last guy, I think this is going to be our National League winner. I wanted to give Ross some credit for it being his rookie season as a campaign, but I also got to talk about, well, Jace Tingler had his first season as well for San Diego. And he was not a hire that a lot of people expected. The team was 70-92 the year before, last place in the National League West. We knew that they had some talent. They spent some money. They got Machado. They had Hosmer on the team. Will Myers had been a great player. Everyone's excited about Tatis. So there was talent there. I don't think many people expected them to become what might have been the second best team in the National League behind the Dodgers, and one of the best records in the National League this year. They are one of the teams that got the short end of the stick when it comes to the playoff format because they finished second. In a normal year, too, they still would have had to do the play-in game, which would have been very unfortunate. But it's a team that's going to be very exciting to watch moving forward. A lot of people are going to be excited about watching them. They made a turnaround that was great. The first postseason run in 14 years. Second best record in the National League behind a Dodgers team that was crazy good. And it seems like the players loved him, had a great time with him. It was one of the most exciting teams in baseball. And I just think Tingler is going to end up being our guy who takes home the award. And well-deserving. Well-deserving. I can't knock any of these three options in the National League. I had a feel for the American League, who's going to be first, second, third. This one I think could go any way. I feel strongest about Tingler being one, second, and third. That's anybody's guess. I'm not even going to throw my name on that one because I have no idea which way that could go. And if the results are announced and Ross wins or Mattingly wins, I power to him. I'm not surprised. I have no complaints. I have no arguments. So giving some due, giving some props, kudos to all these guys. So congratulations. And by tomorrow, like we said, you guys will know who our winners are. I look forward to seeing who gets picked tonight. So that's going to be it for the second segment here in the GSMC Baseball Podcast. We are going to take another quick break, and then I want to talk about some names. I have some potential names that I think we're going to start talking about more and more as this offseason goes on. Coming up next on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
So me and along with a lot of the other people that have been working here at the GSMC Baseball Podcast have been doing a great job covering free agency, giving some updates, looking at potential destinations for a lot of players. And I'm proud of our coverage. I think we've done a good job. But we've all really been focusing on kind of the same big name players. Let's be honest. The talk of this postseason is really around Bauer, Realmuto, Ozuna. And we can start throwing in LeMahieu, his big name as well. Springer, Simeon, Nelson Cruz. There's a plethora of some big-time relievers that are in this conversation as well. But we have some other names that may come to be big talking points moving forward. Now, I don't necessarily expect all of these guys to be moved because a lot of them are trade candidates, and I could see this going really either way. But I just kind of jotted down. I'm like, okay, strengths and weaknesses of the free agency class paired along with some guys that could be traded, along with, hey, what's a name that potentially is going to pick up some steam in free agency? I focus mainly around trade targets. I have one name who's a big-time free agent, but mostly trade targets. So the first thing that I really thought of when looking at this is third base is an issue, and the corners are really an issue overall. Now, there's depth when it comes to infield players, mainly a lot of guys that spend a lot of time at second base and free agents. Shortstop is not bad. We have some nice names there. But when it comes to third base and first base solely most of your time, if you want to upgrade at that position, free agency most likely is not going to be the spot to do it, unless if your third baseman and first baseman were just a dumpster fire. I mean, like, if things were not great and all you could do was go up, okay, different story. But there's a couple of guys that need to be talked about in the trade market. And the first one, this one is no surprise. It's been a conversation point for quite some time. But Chris Bryant is going to be discussed quite a bit. Now, when it comes to Chris Bryant's contract, he is going to be paid $18.6 million in the 2021 season at age 29, and then he goes to be an unrestricted free agent. So if you're going to be getting the most bang for your buck on Chris Bryant and you're hoping that he has a bounce-back season, considering the fact that he wasn't too great in his age 28 year, you're probably going to want the full season from him. Now, he batted .206, 4 home runs, 11 RBIs. Just wasn't his best. He's still not an awful defensive player. He does fine at third base. And a team that's looking to upgrade that spot should be pushing for him to get him over before the season starts. I look a lot at the Atlanta Braves being very interested in Bryant. And with that unrestricted free agency, and they want to make an all in move, they've done the 1 year deals with Donaldson and Ozuna. Like they've done this in the past. I look at this similar in the sense that they're doing a 1 year deal. Yeah, they're going to have to trade something back, but I feel like this is what the Braves do. They cash in on these 1 years left in their contract when these players need to play their best. And the other thing is with the Cubs, they need to start paying some other guys. Javi Baez is a free agent next year. They have to kind of make that decision between Bryant and Baez. Rizzo has contract talks that are going to be coming up. There's a lot going on for the Cubs, and they're going to have to pay some of their main core. And I just feel like Chris Bryant is going to be the odd man out, and it just ends up being the right time to trade him because with that weakness at third base. I don't like the idea of holding him till the trade deadline because it's harder to shell out good prospects for half a season. Yeah, you're taking away the teams that might be overperforming and gets a little over anxious and try to buy. But I think a team truly needs to go after Chris Bryant this offseason before everything starts in 2021 so you get a full year out of him. Staying at that third base position, we need to talk about Nolan Arenado as well. And I have to say, I feel bad for the Rockies because they're a team that I think could potentially be something. The top part of that lineup has potential. Blackmon, Arenado, Story. It's there. There's stuff that can be done there. But I feel like Arenado is going to be looked at hard in this trade market because he's similar in the sense that he could be a free agent in 2022. Could be. But if he gets traded to a situation where he feels comfortable and he likes it, he could be under salary for quite some time. Now, I don't think a lot of teams are running to the Rockies to start paying $35 million a year for a singular player, but that's what Arenado's salary could be from 2020 all the way to 2024. 2025 can drop to $32 million, 2026, $27 million. But he has that opt-out after the 2021 year. So it's hard to say fully if he is going to be tradable because maybe his plan is to ultimately opt out and get paid again. He has a full no trade clause as well. His incentives aren't massive. Gold Gloves, $25,000, Silver Slugger, $50,000. World Series MVP, $75,000, MVP or comeback player, $100,000, and All-Stars, $25,000. Those incentives aren't massive because it's a lot of just flat out salary. And I just wonder if a team would take a chance on him for 1 year, or they might ultimately be thinking, hey, he doesn't love it in Colorado. Maybe if we trade from here, he'd want to stay here for the long haul. And now all of a sudden, bang, we have a third baseman of the future. Because he is 29 years old, so he's not over the hump. He's still a great player. I could see the talks picking up with that opt-out in mind. Little down season for him as well, bet at 253, 8 home runs, 26 RBIs. But you're going to see a common trend here. There's a lot of guys that had down seasons. And I think most teams are going to be thinking, last year was a fluky, unique year. We're expecting this to bounce back. And with that mindset, I think a lot of teams are going to be looking at their roster and going, do we trade these guys now while teams believe that they can bounce back and they have this value? Or do we wait till the trade deadline so that they could potentially up their value and trade them there? But my thought process is, okay, you just had the bad season. So do you want to take the risk of them starting off cold again and then all of a sudden their value plummets even more? And I bring that up because it leads me into my next two players. I have a team that I know is not winning in the near future in the Pittsburgh Pirates. Sorry, Pirates fans, it's not happening. And you have two players that I'm very interested in if I am a team that needs to upgrade or I'm a team that's a contender. I'm looking at Josh Bell as my first guy. Josh Bell, 28 years old. Great. Switch hitter, even better. First base. Hey, that position isn't too strong in this free agent class. That's three positives right there. What else can we add on top of that? Oh, your salary is only $6 million this year? Oh, that's a steal. Oh, there's more? We have club control for you the following season as well. I think Josh Bell is a no-brainer trade target. And I don't blame the Pirates if they hold on to him up to the trade deadline. I don't blame them in the slightest. But if I am the Pirates, I'm scared that he has another down year and then my value isn't there. Now, his contract, his age, his switch hitter, his position should help him. And, potentially could play DH too if you really want him to, considering the fact that the American League, and we don't know 100% what the National League is doing yet. But if he comes out and he's batting 200 again next year, the power numbers are down, they lose some value. I'm wondering if teams are going to say, hey, we know what he's capable of, so we'll pay more top dollar of what we think he's worth to pry him away. I know with where I live in my area, I definitely think that the Brewers should be a team all in on this. We'll see if that actually ends up going anywhere, but I think a lot of teams should be interested in Josh Bell. And the Pirates should very much be interested in getting as many assets as they possibly can, because 2021 and 2022 don't look like they're going to be winning seasons in the near future. Okay. And that also leads me to another player. I wonder about Collin Moran as well. Similar situation with Bell, 28 years old. Great. 3 years of control left. Well, that's very interesting. $2.5 million salary this year. Not too bad. And he plays third base. Again, corner spot. Going to be helpful. Now, he has been a little better last year than Bell. And he would be someone that I for sure think gets held up to the trade deadline. But again, the Pirates, it doesn't look like winning is in their future. So if a team wants to get a little more aggressive and push for these two players now, that makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. And I think the Pirates could get some nice prospects back for those two players. And they're only going to help teams. I think a lot of people should be calling Pittsburgh trying to pry these two away. One other last trade target. I've been on this one for a while. This one still bothers me. I think it pains me more and more that I have to talk about it. But Lance Lynn needs to be moved from Texas. Needs to be moved. I am really sick of him being off in Texas when they should have traded him to cash in last year. He's got a base salary of $8 million for this year. One season. This is the last season that the Rangers have him. Thing with pitchers is you can hold these guys till the deadline. They have a lot of value. Starting pitchers have great value at the deadline, especially if they have been performing well. But they didn't cash in before when they had a stud pitcher at his highest value in Mike Minor. And I really feel like this team needs to learn from their mistake, unless if they go splashy in free agency and start signing some bats and they think they're going to compete and they're going to win. But I don't know if I necessarily see that either. Lance Lynn's name is going to pick up steam this offseason. I don't understand why it doesn't have more right now, but he's someone that I would be thinking about if I wanted any type of starting pitching help. So, short and sweet on that one, but I've been on that bus for a while, trying to get off of that, but it just doesn't seem to be going anywhere. The last one I want to talk about, here's the actual free agent. An actual free agent that I find very interesting is Marcus Stroman. Now, the catch of this class is Trevor Bauer. Charlie Morton's also going to get a lot of, noise because he's on that Rays team. He might be a little bit of a steal. I really do think he's going to be interesting. Paxton tonight. There's a lot of pitchers out there, but I think Stroman has the potential to be one of the better ones. And I think I'm just curious to what his contract's going to be. That might be a major part of it. He was going to get a qualifying offer of $18.9 million from the Mets, and all reports indicated that was going to get turned down. So he's thinking he's going to get above that, and he very much might. I don't want to knock that, but taking a season off, the last time we saw him, he was still a really good pitcher, and he was really good for the Mets. I think some teams are going to think, okay, he's coming back from an injury, but he should be healthy. Things could be very good for Marcus Stroman. Could be very good. And, I mean, when you look at his numbers, you just have to think, all right, we can't really complain. In 2019, split between two teams. He was 10-13, but he had 3.22 ERA. Started 32 games. Yeah, he's not the major strikeout guy you probably want him to be, but he gets people out. He had 159 strikeouts over 32 starts in 2019. I mean, his career high is 166 in 32 games with Toronto. He's just going to be a solid guy, and I think he's going to be a name that picks up steam because I imagine Bauer signs, and then we start looking to the next group, the next tier of starting pitchers, and that's where Stroman is going to be getting all of his attention right there. Once Bauer's done, next guys. So those are just some of the names that I think are going to be picking up steam as we go along, and I think deservingly so. I really hope we see some trades and move guys along because with some of these contracts, you're getting some bargains, but also these teams got to understand you're coming from a unique season in 2020, and you might be able to use that to an advantage when it comes to trading right now, and you really got to hope that those down seasons were just flukes if you hold on to them and go into the trade deadline. So that's going to be it for this segment. We're going to take one last break, and then I want to take the time to talk about some teams that I think could be interesting in this upcoming offseason. Not the ones you're really expecting. It's some of those other guys coming up here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
So with all this coverage that we are giving to this offseason, there's one thing that I feel like has been very clear, very evident when it comes to talking about, in particular, this free agent class. And that thing is, we're looking at the big teams to be our spenders. And I think that's fair. I think that's very clear. But there are going to be a few other teams this year outside of your normal spenders, like your Yankees, your Red Sox. There are going to be some teams, your Dodgers. I should give a little National League love as well. There are going to be some teams that are going to be spenders or at least going to be aggressive, I feel like, coming into the postseason that aren't your usual suspects. And I wanted to take the time to write about. I have 5 teams written down here, 5 of them, but I believe in a few to be more aggressive than others, and I have my reasons why. So I want to start things off with talking about the Toronto Blue Jays. This was my team of last year, that one of my few teams that I was really excited about watching and I thought could be exciting. And it was mainly because of the young talent they had. I didn't expect them to be so competitive, but I was still surprised nonetheless. And I really wonder if after a team gets that taste of the postseason, of that competitive nature, where they were able to put some things together, what comes next? What really comes next? They believe in this core. I can't say that they can get over Bichette, Guerrero, Biggio. And that's just the names that we spend the most time on. There's a lot of other guys. That Jin Ryu ended up being a awesome signing for the Blue Jays. You got a top-notch starter. But I think they're going to want more. And with them having a belief in this core and not having big contracts to deal with right now, I'm not going to be surprised if they're going to go after some big names. And now, I wouldn't be shocked if they're one of the teams that ends up being in on Bauer. Go get that other starter to help your team out. That makes a lot of sense to me. But I have another name that I actually am a little more interested in to help join Guerrero, Biggio, Bichette, Hernandez, Gurriel. I wonder if they're going to be the surprise team that goes in on Francisco Lindor. Bichette can move to third. Lindor can go to short. You can play him 1 year if you really want to. It takes me back to when the Blue Jays had a good team going with Edwin Encarnacion, Joey Bats. They had an offense, pretty solid offense. And then they made that move to get Troy Tulowitzki to try to really put the team all together. I wonder if we could see something similar. I think it's possible. I like the idea of putting all this young talent together. Now, is Lindor a possible extension candidate in Toronto? Different story. I don't know if we'll possibly see that one, especially with so many young guys developing. You don't 100% know what's going to be Vlad Jr., Biggio, what these guys are going to be. So it's hard to commit all this money to one guy. But if there was a time to do it, it'd be right now and try to win while they're all on cheap contracts and arbitration. But I think they're going to potentially be in on Bauer. Could be in on LeMahieu. That's possible as well. I love the idea of Francisco Lindor. And I love the idea of them potentially trying to help their bullpen out a little bit. Try to sign some guys there. The 8th seed, hey, that was great. But they want to be more than that. And I believe it. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the Blue Jays get a little creative. The next team is a team, I want to see these guys competitive again. I want to see this. You know, the San Francisco Giants were a real surprise this last year. The NL West is tough, man. That is a tough division. The Dodgers are good. The Padres are good. And they're going to be good next year. No surprises there. I think the Rockies are interesting, but I don't know what they're going to put together next year. What a collapse they had. The Diamondbacks might not be as competitive. They wanted to be the team in the West this year, but may not be enough. So that Giants team, they surprised. That rebuild was going a little bit quicker. They also had some veterans that really played well. Now we get to see Buster Posey come back as well. They have some bad contracts that they could move on from. This is a pretty good front office. And they haven't had a deep run in a while. Postseason, World Series. They had a stretch where they were one of the best teams in baseball for about 6 seasons. They knew how to go win World Series. I wonder if they're going to go make some moves and they want to build upon what they had last year. I think even with such a tough division ahead of them and with us really clearly unknown with what our playoff format's going to look like next year, I still think it's possible that these guys try to make some big moves and make their team even better. And they're going to go in while they have Solano. They're going to go in while they have Yastrzemski playing some of their best baseball. Because those couple guys aren't necessarily all young. And they have other guys like Brandon Crawford, who's been there, Wilmer Flores, who, he's 29, so he's not necessarily crazy young. Evan Longoria, they still have some older guys to mix in with a couple of younger guys. I wouldn't be surprised to be aggressive. So that's just the team that I would be watching. The Giants, do they go all in? Do they go aggressive? I won't be surprised. The third team, I want to talk about the Detroit Tigers. We know their strength. They have some young pitching that these prospects just got called up, just got their first taste the 2020 year, some up and down stuff. But I'm intrigued by them for a different reason. Now, they finished last in the American League Central, and I don't think they believe they're fully last. Minnesota's going to be good. The White Sox are going to be good. Cleveland's going to be good. So they might make some signings that are beyond this year. I think they believe that they're better than Kansas City as well. I just don't fully buy the idea that A.J. Hinch agreed to go to a team and completely rebuild again. Hinch went through that with the Astros. Got to the top of the mountain. Yes, I know he has a scandal underneath, but I don't necessarily believe the scandal stopped him from getting a job, or at least a great job if it came out open. He was going to be considered for that White Sox position. They ended up going La Russa. He took one of the other openings. I don't think the Red Sox position was ever open for him. I was sitting here clamoring, saying I think it's going to be Cora. I won't be surprised if it be Cora. I don't think the Red Sox ever had anybody really other than Cora on their mind. Yeah, they might have talked to some guys, but was it real? Hard to say. They would have needed a guy to blow them away. I think they're going to try to give some players to Hinch. They don't want to go full rebuild. They want these young pitchers to realize their potential and have a little bit of offense to go behind it. I find it hard to believe that they convince Hinch to come coach Detroit if they don't have something there to get him a little bit excited about. And in all reality, another 250 season from Miguel Cabrera. I mean, he had 10 home runs, batted 250, 35 RBIs. That's not an awful season for him if you get that again next year as he's aging a little bit. Jonathan Scope was good for him. We'll see what happens with him if there's a reunion. They had some good performances. They had some all right players. I mean, Willie Castro was someone who was a great, great player, 23-year-old shortstop. I think they could be slight buyers in this postseason, whether it be trade or free agent acquisition. I got my eyes on that Tigers team. I think it's interesting. So that's definitely my top three. Not your normal spenders. Now we've seen the Giants and Tigers give up big contracts in the past. Giants with some pitching ones, Tigers. We've seen it. Not surprising. But with the situations they're in and the pandemic, maybe making it tougher for teams outside of the Mets, Yankees, Red Sox, Dodgers, our normal suspects in spending, I think we could see these three getting to be interesting, be slightly aggressive to show that they're a competitive team in MLB. And like I said, I had two more written down. I'm interested to see what the Twins do this year. They had a little bit of money come off the books. Are they going to use that again on Nelson Cruz? Hoping for a reunion. I bet you a lot of Twins fans are hoping that happens. And they really should. They really should be hoping that happens. I could see them trying to make some other moves. I could see them being in on the Bauer market as well, starting pitching, trying to get any type of pitching to help out, because we know that their offense is strong. It's been that way for a while. I think they could definitely make some moves there. But I know it's not their MO. I know it's not their thing. But I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it out loud, and it seems crazy to come off the tongue. But the Tampa Bay Rays could be interesting this postseason or this offseason. They cleared a lot of money in options and free agents coming up. Quite a bit of money. And they were a deep team already with one of the best farm systems in baseball. There's a lot there that has my attention. So we'll see what happens with them. I want to throw them out there. After being a guy that talked so much about the differences in contracts between the Rays and the Dodgers, I just got to say, I find it interesting. I find it interesting how they've set themselves up to potentially make a move or two. And we'll say it once again, if they come knocking on your door to try and make a trade, do not trade with the Rays. You don't win those trades. You never win those trades. They happen to pull it off every single time. So that's going to be it for my teams that I think could be some aggressive players this offseason outside of your normal spenders. There are definitely teams that I'm going to be watching. There's going to be a few more, I'm sure. Some surprises. It always seems to happen. But that's going to be it for the GSMC Baseball Podcast here on the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I'm your host, Collin Manley. I want to thank you for listening, downloading. Very much appreciated. Feedback is loved as well. You guys do a great job of leaving comments, reviews, reaching out. If you have the time, have the ability, would love to hear from you to leave any type of comment, any type of positive review. Could be about this show, a past show, anything you want us to talk about. Maybe you have some other names you're looking at this offseason. Maybe you have a surprise team or you just want your team to spend this offseason. I know, we've all been there, that's for sure. But want to thank you once again for tuning in. It means a great deal. Signing off here, Collin Manley on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.